The Professional and Personal Life of Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff.
I'm Letitia Ferrer, the daughter of Uta Hagen and stepdaughter of Herbert Berghoff.
I'm Teresa Tuscher, the granddaughter of Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff.
We created this podcast to share ours and other stories of life with Uta and Herbert.
We hope you'll join us in listening to these adventures.
Hey everybody, it's been a minute and we're going to go back in time. You might recognize this name, Roebling, Kris Roebling. He is the son of Olga and Paul Roebling, who studied with Uta Hagen, my grandmother. And Kris and I are just here today. We're going to chat about just his parents studying with my grandparents. And he walked by the studio recently. And I asked him if he would like to talk about this and share his stories. And we're just here and we're just going to freestyle. And Kris, thanks for giving us some of your time.
Of course. I'm delighted to do so. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. So tell me, what stories do you remember about your parents and the studio? Because as I said, you walked by the studio and you posted something on Facebook and said, that school you started to revisit what it meant to you and how much it brought you into the world that you are now and the world that you grew up in.
Absolutely. I mean, at first, it's worth mentioning that for my parents, that place would have been like the equivalent of what the Vatican is for a Catholic. It was their absolute and complete spiritual center, and everything that they cared about and loved was within the walls of that place. And when I was from when I was born to quite a bit older until I'm going to say into my uh, maybe into my 30s, honestly. It was um, it was a place that I was very much around, and seeing the creative process taking place, going on with your grandma and Herbert and my parents and all of them collaborating over and over and over again on projects. And although it is clearly a place that focused on the theater and how to unleash your own creative potential in the theater, I saw it as also just a mecca for the support of creativity in general.
Yeah.
I had a definite sense that your grandma and Herbert were both very supportive just of the creative process in any and all forms that it took.
Yeah.
So I come out into my life being predominantly a music a singer-songwriter, recording artist, and producer, occasionally working on film. But nevertheless, I feel like to a good degree that place had a huge impact on my sense of what it meant to be a creative person and how to conduct oneself, how to fight the good fight for staying creative in what sometimes seems like a hopelessly unimaginative world.
Yeah.
um, and so it was an incredibly powerful place for me. Also, I realize as time goes by, uh, partially because of how absolutely central and pivotal it was to my parents' lives, but also because of that, like I said, spent a lot of time there and was very invited by Herbert and Uta to sort of involve myself in whatever was going on. And so it also informed my own creativity, although I will admit, to my chagrin, that I never took a class there, but I was just there all the time.
I was just gonna say, so what did you do there? Because, we're not that far apart in age, and I
Yeah.
think you were mostly there. Well, when were you there?
I was there from when I was a small child to
Okay.
honestly to before I can remember. My earliest memories of the studio was really almost more impressions because that's how far back it was. I mean, my
Hmm.
earliest memories, I think I was around 3 or 4, uh,
Okay.
being there, and it was more just impressions of being in a room with a lot of people watching a show and not quite understanding even what that meant at that time. But I was very young when Tomorrow first started as something that is, as you know, was developed over there at HB, and then
I'm
finally
not familiar with that. What is that?
Tomorrow was a short story written by William Faulkner,
Okay.
um, that was turned by Horton Foote, the playwright Horton Foote,
Yes.
into a full-length play,
Okay.
which Herbert, I believe, directed
Okay.
there
Hmm.
with my mom and Robert Duvall playing the two characters that are sort of pivotal to the they're sort of basically the two main people in the play. Other than that, the people that are
That's so
interested
cool.
come in and out, and
See,
it did very
I
well.
never knew this.
Yeah, it did. It was, I think, I'm pretty sure. I mean, Herbert either was the director or was sort of like the Uber director. He was one of them
Okay.
because I know he was deeply and profoundly involved in the process of doing
Okay.
it. And so my mom did this with Duval, who was also, a student there, and my parents are both very good friends with him as
Hmm.
a result of being at HB.
Right.
Um, and I think everyone sort of agreed that the play went very, very well there, and they
Okay.
were very happy with it. And so discussions started for it to become a movie. Um,
Okay.
and after lots of work and wrangling and trying to find distribution and investors and things of that sort, it did become a movie. And
Okay.
it's now it's considered an incredibly highly regarded movie. It's perpetually on Turner Classics, and
Okay.
uh, and it's just and it really is it's a great film. It's
And
a very
it's your mom and Robert Duvall.
yeah.
That's so
And
cool.
yeah, and my dad technically was the producer, but
Okay.
let's just say he's technically the producer, but to a certain degree he was also the director.
Okay. Okay.
um, Herbert wound up not following through into the film
Okay.
part of it to a certain degree because he was slightly ambivalent. He felt of himself as much more of a theater
Hmm.
director than a film
Hmm.
director.
Hmm.
And also doing Tomorrow would have involved being away from his work
Yeah.
at the
At the
studio
studio.
for like 6 months, and so he was very ambivalent about the idea of doing it, and so my parents didn't belabor the issue. They said,
Okay.
okay, in fact, they kind of respected his concerns. They were like, well,
Yeah.
okay, maybe those are valid concerns,
Yeah.
So so they wound up working with someone else. And honestly, just full disclosure, since everyone is from that generation is unfortunately no longer walking this earth,
Yeah.
that resulted in a temporary, I think, a little tension between them for a little while,
Okay.
which over time was over the course of the next few years, I think, was finally smoothed out. But
Between Herbert and my grandmother and your parents.
yes,
Okay.
because I think there was a sense that my parents should have maybe insisted more to just be like, you don't have a choice, Herbert, you're doing this, and the fact that they were sort of like,
Yeah.
okay, if we don't want to do, we don't want to force. um, and so for a moment, I think there was a rocky patch, but because they really, when the day is done, I think all truly adored each other. um, it was something they worked through.
Yeah. But it had been known to happen along the road of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, and then I mean after
We,
that, they did endless projects with them
yeah.
after that, so
Okay.
so they did get to the other end of it, and
It's nice to hear that they did get to the other end because
yeah, they did. I mean, they projects keep,
sometimes you don't.
yeah. I
Sometimes you
mean,
don't.
Herbert's last thing was just a two-person play with my dad and him, just
Which
before
one?
he died. It was a Strindberg play, I think, called December.
Okay.
And it was just a two-person play. So I mean, anyway, just to say that they're after that, they're I think to the sign for them of being on a good footing with each other is if they
Yeah.
kept working. If they keep working, that's a sign that they
Yeah.
still
If
love.
you, I think with my grandmother and Herbert was always if you kept working and you were true to the craft. Because I spoke to
Yeah.
Victor Slazak, and he got in. He had a conversation with my grandmother, and it got heated. But
Mm,
then it came back to you're being true to the craft. And I think
mm,
with that, if
mm,
that was held, whoever you were, then there was the invitation to revisit and to reconnect and rebond and keep moving forward. So, but I don't know if you knew this, but I know that you're friends with him, Ben Stiller, who you did the album that I still have
We've done a
from
number of
the
albums
80s.
now.
Well,
We're
the
working right
first
now.
one,
Yeah.
are you? That's so cool. But the first one that I have from like way back when was Capital Punishment. And his parents also studied with my grandparents.
I know my parents and his parents were besties
Really?
at HP Studios. Yeah, I mean that's why I know Ben because my parents and Anne and Jerry all became really great friends while they were all working at HB, because at that point Ben and Anne were focusing on drama, not on comedy.
Okay.
And so they were there, and the two of them, Robert Duvall, Fritz Weaver, they all were like a clan they were all very tight,
Okay.
It's also worth mentioning that, that Herbert and Uta, introduced my parents to each other too,
Did they?
Yeah.
That I didn't know. I've heard the story about Anne and Jerry through, through Charles Nelson Riley's story. But so tell us that story.
Well, I think Herbert said, I want to introduce you to this man in the other room named Paul Roebling. My mom thought that he said Paul Robeson. so
Two very different people.
She was sort of she walked in, she's like, oh, okay, hi. But she apparently walked into the next room, so like with the jitters, like, okay. But they wound up, kicking off real well. And obviously they very soon after that, they were working on a number of projects at HB that my parents came to really deeply love each other on. And then very quickly after that, got the opportunity to perform Romeo and Juliet, specifically the balcony scene on national television on what was called Westinghouse Theater, which was a very popular, it might have been a slightly different name than that, but it was Westinghouse something.
Okay.
And it was basically live theater broadcast at primetime television.
Okay.
And so at the time, it was a very popular show. And so they were on an episode called The Romeos and Juliets, which were 4 different ways that Romeo and Juliet are done. The classic way, ballet, West Side Story, and I forget what the 4th one was, but it was these 4 ways of performing Romeo and Juliet, and for that my parents did the classic proper, I don't mean, but the original version, the Shakespeare version. They did the balcony scene on national TV, and I saw the kinescope of it, and actually the chemistry it's quite clear that they actually are really into each other.
But they were. I only met your parents once, and that was when you guys lived in that apartment on 72nd Street, was it?
Yeah, you came over. I remember that.
Yep. And
you were like
I got my album.
Old.
Yeah, I was a teen. But I got my album, and that was the first time that I met them, and it was just, they were.
Yeah, they were cool people.
They were, and I remember your dad telling me stories. How long were your parents married for?
Well, for their entire lives. They died out of their marriage, but they I think they got married in like 62 or 3.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
And maybe 61, somewhere in the early 60s.
Okay.
And and then for their entire lives they were married. My mom died in 87, I think.
Was it that long?
Yeah, I've been.
Wow.
It's for me. I haven't had parents for most of my life now, which is very strange because they regardless are still very sort of like central to my consciousness, even if time-wise they only were around for a fraction of my existence. I was actually gonna bring up something else that's unrelated, so I will defer to you.
Oh, okay. No, I was just gonna say, because we talked about this, and I remember when you performed at the studio playing the guitar, and the memorial, and it was just like, for me it was so different because it was the first time I grew up at the theater in the studio as well, and it was all about acting. and it was just acting. There was no musical theater. There was fencing classes. There was jazz classes. There was all of that. But the theater, 124, was acting. And you were the first time that I had ever seen any type of music being performed in that space. And I was like, I'm confused. I mean, it was weird because it was like you were playing the electric guitar and we're in a theater. And I'm like, I get it, but I feel so disconnected.
Yeah.
Because it was two different things. But it was, it was in honor of your mom. And I just I remember that really, it was a big impact on my life at the time. And I was like, I get it. And he's playing but what?
Right. If you've seen one thing there all the time over and over, it's weird to see a different medium, right?
Right. And I mean, and I also grew up doing like the Second Shepherd's play there, playing the little angels and all that. So to see that, and I remember you were just sitting on a stool and you were just playing.
That was, it was a great honor to do that. And I have to say, the other time that I was actually personally involved, besides being part of, helping out while they were working on, I was at endless rehearsals there all the time. And so they would sort of get me, they would get me to help out with, sort of labor. And I also once did sound design for something that went on there. I can't remember.
Okay.
But I and my dad once made a 45-minute movie on Super 8 that was sort of a thriller, a kind of scary movie actually, called The Stranger. And for whatever reason, Herbert, sight unseen, insisted that we show it to one of his adult classes. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Now, I thought, well, if he's teaching a kid's class maybe or something.
Right.
But he was like, no, I have a feeling, come screen it for us. And so there in that main room, we set up a projector, and it's a 45-minute movie, and played it for his adult his adult students. And about halfway through, I started hearing it sounds like he's like coughing or clearing his throat, and as it goes on, it's sort of, he's getting louder and louder. Finally, near the end, when it's really becoming like, is he okay? I turn around and I realize he's bawling his eyes out. He was just crying and crying. And so when it was done and the lights turn on, he just leaps at me and puts his hands around me and just starts crying. And
wow.
It was clearly sincere. And the fact that his response wasn't like, that's really good for you, Kris, but that he invested himself in what I was trying to do to a degree that he could be moved, that he was that sensitive to that was to me shocking and a revelation. It was like, wow. So, you can be creative and have someone as amazing as this guy be moved by it. And it was for me, it was a life changer to have him take something that I'd done creatively that seriously and been moved by it. I was, I cannot forget it to this day, his response, and having this grown man crying on my shoulder. I was very moved by it. And another thing that both your grandma and Herbert used to do was for whenever it was time, a holiday or a birthday or something like that, they would always give me something that assumed that I wasn't like a little kid or incapable of addressing mature content. So they would, they would give me things like Faust and say and they'd be like, you're gonna like that. And because of the fact that they trusted that this is something I could handle and that I would like, I took it very seriously. And I can't tell you how many things from Shakespeare and how many scenes from Faust I learned because they thought that I was capable of learning them, and I found that to be a great inspiration. And so I still remember whole scenes from Faust as a result.
It's amazing because if you think about teachers doing that now, not so much.
No.
I mean, my mom could learn, she knew Shakespeare at the age of 4.
Wow.
She could just read it. And it was like, who does that?
Wow.
But that's what they did. They handed gifts and they kind of pushed the boundaries on saying, we're going to give you this, and like, whether you appreciate it or not now, further down the road, you'll be like, this was, oh my God,
Yeah.
what I got back then.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. I was very touched by that, because normally I got, when I was a little kid, I would be given things that were, shiny and bouncy and made cool sounds and it required batteries,
Yeah.
And so the fact, it very much moved me to be like, I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to do, and so as a very young person, I was trying to learn these parts of these plays and all that because of the fact that, I could tell right away that your grandma and Herbert, I mean, just from seeing how they worked with stuff, were just insanely brilliant people, and so I was moved to, if I was given something by them, to be like, I want to do my best to rise to the occasion.
I was going to say, like, learn it.
Yeah.
Learn it.
Yeah. And again, I wasn't a student per se of theirs, but I felt like in a certain way I was.
But I was going to say, like, you could, at the times that they were there, you didn't have to be a student. Like, if you were hanging out there and you had free time, you were in, and you didn't have to be in the class per se.
No.
But like, spring cleanup, come and help with this, as you said before, with tech stuff. Come and just be part of that community. And it was also at a time where you could be part of that community. And like, it was okay. There were things, you could get away with or around doing without having to pay for a class or to, physically come in with work. And that, I think, was one of the best parts of the studio. Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, I think there was a sense of inclusivity and a sense of caring about people's well-being and recognizing them. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, even to this day, right, isn't there still like a sign up that recognizes like a builder who
It's gone. You're talking about in 120 on the stairs?
Yeah.
That one's gone. They took it down a long time ago.
They took it down. But I mean, to me, that sort of shows something about, their thinking about even being in a building and like even having a part of their mind be like, wow, someone went to the trouble of making this place, and recognizing that it shows a deep level of compassion, I think, and not that Herbert and Uta couldn't, have their tempers and things like that, but I think in the bigger picture of things, they were very compassionate people,
They were driven and they were obsessed. And at that time, you could have all those components and be a driving force, which I've often said that my grandmother was. You were just there recently. What did it feel? You went into the buildings, didn't you?
Yes, well, because like I said, both of my kids have done time there,
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Who did they study with?
August was at this, I can't remember anymore. I did know at the time. August was there for about a year and he loved it. The only reason why he stopped was just because at this point in his life, just circumstantially, it was just impossible for him to keep going just because he's also doing this and that,
Yep.
But he did for about a year and wound up by the end of that year performing scenes from Chekhov and things of that sort, which again about that spirit of them taking you seriously at whatever age you are, and saying you can do Chekhov.
Yeah.
So and my younger one, Chase, is there right now.
Okay. Yeah. How old are your boys now?
One is a sophomore. He's 18. My older one.
Okay.
My younger one is 15. Yeah.
And who does the younger one study with?
I have to.
Is it Trudy? Trudy?
Yeah. I mean, it's the person who currently is doing the teens class.
Okay.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, there was only one person.
Okay.
And it was a lady.
Trudy Steibel?
Sounds right. Yeah, actually. Yeah. I remember sitting in some of Bill Hickey's classes too, back in the day, and thinking.
Have you gone downstairs to 120?
Not recently, no.
If you go into the buildings, if you go into 120 downstairs, they have a picture of Bill next to his studio and a picture of his dog.
Oh yeah, that's
who
right.
had like
He had the dog that he adored. You're right.
he
That's
had
right.
yeah, he had who had the massive dreads. But
Right.
how
That's
is
right.
it for you now walking into the schools with your son versus like where when you walk into the buildings, what does it bring you now as a father versus when you were there and you were a child?
Right. Well, the fact I think maybe not just as a father, but as a father with kids that actually have now spent a certain amount of time actually there, taking classes of their own.
Hmm.
Um, it certainly gives me a sense of the insistence of the creative process if your family has the bug.
Okay.
um, to not let itself die, and so
Okay.
I feel in that there's this incredible sense of continuation, of the creative process. And although Uda and Herbert aren't there themselves, I guess for me there is a certain element of, and maybe it's wrong to think this way because maybe really what it comes down to is the vital realities of who's doing what in the present. But there is a certain hallowed nature to for me to that place because of the fact that I think that 3 generations now of my family,
Yeah.
my parents, me, and my kids
Yeah.
have a love affair with that space in one way or another, and so it's meaningful to me. And for my parents, I mean, to say that it was a game changer for them, that place would be an understatement.
Hmm.
They both came from worlds, both of them, very different worlds, but from worlds that required breaking away from a community that had no understanding of the creative process.
Okay.
My dad was being, groomed by his mom to run a factory, basically,
Okay.
to run a company, which is what he was sort of supposed to do.
Okay.
And so when he found himself, and I don't know how exactly, I don't know what the circumstance was that he found himself stumbling into uh, HB, which by the way, at the time was not where it is now.
So
Um,
which location was it?
it was on the second floor
Sixth
of a
Avenue
building
between
on Sixth
24th and
Avenue. Yeah,
24th and 20, which
yeah.
the main floor is now like a video porn store.
Is it? I
Yeah.
know for many years it was a very famous like exotic dancer place, the first
Yeah.
floor, and
Yeah.
then the laws changed and it closed down.
Right.
But yeah, but before any of that was there,
Hmm.
uh, on the second floor, that was where they used to do their thing, and
Okay.
that's where a lot of work was done back in the days. And then my parents were very involved in the process of getting them to locate and acquire uh, Bank Street. So
Oh, okay.
they were very hands on in that process.
Okay.
And I think as a result, somewhere, maybe not anymore, but there used to be a plaque up there that said, it gave the names of all the people that were involved in sort of making the Bank Street location happen. And my parents were,
That might be in the theater.
yeah.
That might be in yeah, in the theater right behind like the little island. I think they have a list of names of people.
Wow.
Um,
Well,
but
that
so
was
you're
so. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Just to quickly get back.
yeah.
So my dad was being set up to be in this completely different world,
Hmm.
to this sort of stodgy corporate existence that he had no interest in, and he discovered Uda and Herbert, and it just changed his life.
Okay.
He realized that this was not just his passion, but it was like his religion, because for him, the insights they gave into the creative process went beyond just being useful techniques for a profession.
Hmm.
They were they were insights into how to live life to its fullest. And so for my parents, they just wanted to be there all the time,
Okay.
and but that involved breaking away, in my dad's case, from his family, because like I said, he was expected to enter into this very stodgy corporate universe, and he did not want to do that, and he'd made this change over to basically living at the HP
Okay.
studio at a time when McCarthyism was taking place. And
Okay.
so if you were choosing to be an actor at that point in time, most people just assumed that meant that you were a card-carrying communist,
Okay.
um, at a time when everyone was terrified of communism.
Yeah.
And so it was just, it was considered just it was like spitting in his family's face that he chose to do that. But that had nothing to do with why he did it. He just deeply and profoundly loved the process and loved Uda and Herbert. And Herbert was if I recall, he was a passionate socialist at the time,
Yes. Yes.
and that's awesome. And I don't
Yeah.
think that bugged my dad one bit.
Okay.
So yeah, so the end result was that it really, to make the choice to focus his life on acting, required essentially that he turn away from
Hmm.
the life and the family that he had had up to that point, because it was sort of like an all or nothing situation. They sort of were like,
Okay.
listen, you're going to do this or there's the door, kind of.
Okay.
And so for dad to choose to become an actor was also to choose to sort of leave the fold of the family, so to speak.
Okay.
I won't go so far and be as dramatic as to say that he was ostracized, but he was pseudo semi ostracized.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
clear that when he chose to enter the world of acting, he was choosing to really leave, um, both, any level of belonging and a familial level behind, and also any of the security, the financial security of that
Yeah.
world. After that, he actually did make his living, as an actor, and had
Okay.
to. So, and then for my mom, in her case, she was the daughter of a steel worker on the south side of Milwaukee, and they didn't get what acting was.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, that's like where people get paid to play make believe or something." Like it was completely anathema to them.
Hmm.
Finally, her dad, who was a steel worker, retired and took his retirement money and bought a tavern on the south side of Milwaukee, where
Okay.
my mom, at 5 years old, would get up on the bar and act out entire movies from beginning to end. She would learn them verbatim, and she would play all the parts, and everyone loved it in the bar. And that was, I think,
Hmm.
the closest that her parents ever got to like getting why it
Okay.
was fun and cool that she wanted to get into acting. But then she moved, she finally wound up in New York, and they couldn't believe that she moved so far away from Milwaukee, because nobody does that. Everyone on the
Okay.
south side of Milwaukee lives and dies in Milwaukee.
Okay.
Uh, well, not everyone, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
And so it was mystifying to them that she wanted to go so far away, and that she did it for that purpose, for becoming an actor, which they didn't understand as a legitimate calling. And
Okay.
and so both my parents, in different ways, had to leave. You really sacrifice a lot in a way, leave behind sort of like the tribes that they
Hmm.
came from, in order
Yeah.
to find themselves. For a long time, my mom was sleeping on Uda and Herbert's couch
Okay.
before she had a place to stay. They
Yeah.
were very nice to let her sleep in there, and then they introduced my parents to each other, and so it was their second home and their second life. And so that's just to explain just like how much it really meant to them.
Yeah. That's it's so interesting because the worlds are polar opposite, and then it's the one thing that brings them together, and then it still continues, right?
Mm-hmm.
But do you know if your parents had to audition for their classes?
I don't know. I mean, I certainly know they weren't coming with any sort of recommendation from anyone. In fact, my grandma, when she saw that my dad, she kind of entertained him doing this for a while, but when she really saw that he was like making his own way, making his own money, and
Hmm.
was really not coming back, she freaked out. And she called someone who was connected with the McCarthy situation, who was part of it, and turned in my dad and reported him as a. She said
No.
she said that my dad and my mom were not actually in love. They were actually communist spies, and that it was totally just a marriage of convenience so that they could be spies. And she tried to get him. She tried to get him blacklisted so that he wouldn't be able to continue acting.
How
And
did your dad respond?
by getting further and further and further away from
Okay.
her, as time went by, but it also always really, really hurt his feelings because he always wanted her to get what he was about, and
Okay.
she sort of never did. And so she sort of perpetually throughout his life kind of broke his heart, because she wanted him to get it and be supportive, and she never
Okay.
really. And then finally she made a call to some general that she knew, to try to get him uh, drafted into the military, and to forcefully do it. And so my dad had to go into an institute for the criminally insane. That's what it was called. I guess now that wouldn't be a PC way to put it, but I think that's what they called it then.
Hmm.
For 3 weeks in order to have himself certified incompetent to.
Good Lord.
So he got locked in a room with a man who tore up the room 24 hours a day for 3 weeks, until he got his certification. And then that was why his mom wasn't able to force him to go to, because he already knew what he wanted to do with his life.
Yeah.
And so that was that. And after that, they were he lived a completely separate life, and Uda and Herbert really became sort of the sort of substitute parents for him.
Wow. Well, the good thing that probably came out of your dad being in there was he had some really good material for any of his,
Yeah.
projects that he was working on. It's funny because that you say that they were his adoptive parents, and that's the way it was often with them. It just became this family of, unity. But it's nice to go back in time to the time when the studio was them,
Hmm.
and because they could bring in anybody.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear these stories, and it's just cool like that your parents knew uh and Jerry Stiller. Like
Yeah.
that's just cool.
Well, there was a
It's just,
lot. I mean, a lot of those people in there went on to become, large celebrities. Like I said,
yeah,
Duval was working on a lot of projects there with my parents.
right.
Um, and then they would bounce from there off to like some sort of television that would be going on in New York simultaneously. So then
Okay.
Mom and Duval would do like a Naked City or two, and
Okay.
they'd go back and do something for HB. But um, yeah, they became great friends with Anne and Jerry, like
It,
total besties. And
okay.
so they always stayed in touch. And so when I was a teenager and their kid Ben was a teenager, and they decided
Hmm.
they wanted Ben, they were asking my parents like, well, where does your kid go to school? And because we're looking for a new school for him, and
Right.
well, here's the school that Kris goes to. And then they said, oh
Right.
well, they tried it out. Next thing I know, so they made a point, his parents and my parents, of introducing us to each other.
Right. So
So
the HB studio community expands
yeah,
outside of the school. I
yeah,
mean, that's,
it did. It absolutely did. Our
that's
band
like,
Capital Punishment would not exist if it weren't for HB Studios. And I should also add, it's and Capital Punishment still exists. We're working on our fourth album now. We're actually signed to a record label. We're releasing stuff.
I remember you guys played at a place on Bleecker Street pre-COVID.
Yeah, that place used to be called the Village Gate,
Okay.
um, but I think now it's called Poisson Rouge. Um, yeah, and we played at Bowery Ballroom, and we played a number of venues. So we've been playing
Nice.
out a lot and working on getting some new material together so we can do another album.
Very cool. Very cool.
That's
Well,
thanks to
it
HB.
yeah, I was gonna say it's the community of HB that keeps growing.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
Kris, thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
of course, my
It's
great
it's
pleasure.
it's the intimate stories that like for me are I love hearing them because
Yeah,
it's a time of the school that doesn't exist anymore.
no, it's true.
And
And I remember we used to have parties, just to bring up your mom too. I remember sometimes HB would get together, we'd have some parties at our place. And I remember
mhm,
my early memories of your mom, I think, was when she was about I'm going to say about 15 years old. Um,
Okay.
and I was younger than her, but
Right.
still remember her. And she would be at the parties, and then she would be hanging out too. So, and I remember at the time she was very shy. So she would
Yep.
sort of
She
herself.
still is. She still is. But that's that's the gift of those times. And like I said, I mean, it's they're for me, they're particularly very special. And being able to hear your stories and other people's, it's a gift. I
Great,
appreciate
great
it.
pleasure. Say hi to your mom.
I shall.
If you like this podcast, please feel free to share this with your friends.
Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more stories on the professional and personal life of Uta Hagen and Herbert.